The day my wife called me a failure, something inside me broke, but something else quietly woke up. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership. Two people standing side by side, facing the world together. At least, that's what I believed when we got married. I wasn't perfect, and I never claimed to be. But I was honest, hard-working, and committed to building a future, not just for myself, but for us. In the early days, things were simple. We didn't have much, but we had hope. Small dreams, big plans, late-night conversations about the life we wanted to create. I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I stayed patient, everything would eventually fall into place. But life doesn't always move at the pace we expect. My career struggled. Opportunities didn't come easily. Some plans failed. Some risks didn't pay off. I was trying constantly, but the results weren't visible yet. And that's when the change in her began. At first, it was subtle. A sigh when bills came. A cold silence when I talked about my plans. A look of disappointment that stayed just a little too long. I told myself it was stress. I told myself she was tired. I told myself love meant understanding. But one evening, after another long day of trying and failing, the words came out, words that would change everything. She looked at me and said, "You're a failure," not shouted, not emotional, calm, controlled, certain. Those two words hit harder than any argument ever could. It wasn't just criticism. It wasn't frustration. It was judgment, a final verdict on who I was as a man, a husband, a provider. In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt small, invisible, replaceable. I tried to explain myself. I talked about effort, patience, long-term goals. She didn't listen. To her, results were everything, and right then, I didn't have enough to show. From that day on, the respect faded. Every conversation became a comparison. Look at him, he's successful. Why can't you be more like them? Others are moving forward, you're still stuck. Home no longer felt safe. I stopped sharing my thoughts. I stopped dreaming out loud. I stopped believing that my own wife saw value in me beyond money or status. Slowly, painfully, I started doubting myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was a failure. The silence between us grew heavier. She became distant, emotionally unavailable. I felt like a burden rather than a partner. Every mistake I made was magnified. Every success I attempted was dismissed as not enough. What hurt the most wasn't her disappointment. It was the lack of belief, because when the person closest to you loses faith in you, the world starts to feel very lonely. I worked harder, not because she encouraged me, but because I was desperate to prove that I wasn't worthless. I took risks. I failed again. I stood back up. I kept going, even when no one clapped, even when no one noticed, and she emotionally checked out. She spoke to me less, respected me less, looked at me like I was temporary, like something she might one day replace. Love turned into tolerance. Partnership turned into judgment. Eventually, the emotional distance became unbearable. We lived in the same house, but in completely different worlds. Conversations were short. Nights were silent. I felt married, yet completely alone. That's when I realized something painful but important. Love without respect slowly becomes emotional abandonment. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't beg for validation. I became quiet, Not because I had given up, but because something inside me was changing. Kay stopped chasing her approval. I started focusing on myself, not to prove her wrong, but to survive. I invested in learning. I rebuilt my skills. I worked when no one was watching. I failed privately. I improved quietly. I told no one what I was planning, because I had learned that dreams spoken to the wrong ears can be destroyed before they grow. She still saw me as a failure, but I had stopped, seeing myself through her eyes. What I didn't know was that life was slowly setting the stage for a moment where everything would reverse, where the person who once judged me would one day look at me differently, not with criticism, but with need. And that moment was coming while she saw a failure. I was quietly becoming someone she would one day depend on. After she called me a failure, something changed inside me, but not in the way she expected. I didn't explode in anger. I didn't argue endlessly. I didn't try to convince her that she was wrong. Instead, I grew quiet, and that silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. I realized something painful but honest. I could not grow in a place where I was constantly being measured, compared, and dismissed. So I stopped explaining myself. I stopped sharing plans that would only be criticized. I stopped talking about ideas that would be laughed at. I stopped seeking validation from someone who had already made up her mind about my worth. From the outside, it probably looked like I had accepted defeat, like I had settled into being less. But inside, a different process had started, one that required patience, discipline, and a level of emotional strength I didn't know I had. I began working quietly, early mornings, late nights, small steps that no one noticed. I educated myself. I learned new skills. I failed privately and improved silently. Every rejection became data, not humiliation. Every mistake became feedback, not proof of failure. I stopped chasing fast success and started building real foundation, and the strange thing was, she didn't notice any of it to her. Nothing had changed. She still saw the man who hadn't made it yet, the husband who didn't meet her expectations, the failure she had already labeled, and, in a way, that worked in my favor, because when no one expects anything from you, you're free to build without pressure. Emotionally, the distance between us grew. We spoke less, shared less. I no longer felt safe being vulnerable around her. Conversations became practical, transactional. The warmth that once defined our relationship faded into routine. But instead of breaking me, that emotional isolation gave me clarity. I learned how to stand alone. I learned how to make decisions without approval. I learned how to trust my own judgment again. I learned that my value didn't need to be confirmed daily to be real. Slowly, things started to change, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. Opportunities appeared, small at first, then bigger. People began to notice my work, my consistency, my reliability. I earned respect not through talk, but through results. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't announce progress. I let time do its job at home. She still wasn't impressed. Success that grows quietly often looks like nothing to those who only believe in visible wins. There were moments when I wanted to tell her, moments when I wanted to say, "You were wrong about me," but I didn't, because by then, I wasn't doing this for her anymore. I was doing it for myself, and then life shifted again, not for me. She started facing problems of her own. Stress, pressure, situations she couldn't control. The confidence she once carried began to crack. The certainty with which she judged me slowly faded as she encountered realities she couldn't fix with criticism. First, I noticed small things. She asked questions. She listened more. She complained less. Then one day she asked for help. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just quietly. It was subtle, but powerful. The same person who once dismissed me now needed my guidance, my patience, my stability, and in that moment, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something deeper, perspective. I realized that life has a strange way of balancing things. The roles we assign to people are rarely permanent. The ones we judge today may be the ones we rely on tomorrow. I helped her, not out of ego, not out of revenge, but because that's who I had become, calm, capable, grounded, and for the first time in a long time, she looked at me differently, not as a failure, not as a disappointment, but as someone dependable. Still, the past wasn't forgotten. The words she had spoken lived somewhere between us, unaddressed, unresolved. I didn't bring them up. I didn't need to, because the truth was becoming visible on its own. The man she once doubted had grown quietly, steadily, without applause, and life wasn't done teaching its lessons yet, because soon she wouldn't just ask for my help, she would need me the most. The man she once called a failure became the only person she could turn to. Life doesn't announce its turning points. They arrive quietly, often disguised as ordinary moments. When she needed me the most, there was no dramatic collapse, no sudden tragedy, just a slow realization that the strength she once overlooked was now essential. Her world began to unravel in ways she never expected. The confidence that once defined her started fading. Situations she believed were under control slipped out of her hands. Decisions she made with certainty began to carry consequences she hadn't prepared for. And for the first time, she was the one standing in uncertainty, unsure, overwhelmed, and emotionally exhausted. I noticed the change before she said anything. Her voice lost its sharpness. Her judgments softened. Her certainty disappeared. One evening, she sat across from me in silence, not scrolling, not distracted, just present. That alone told me something was wrong. She didn't criticize. She didn't compare. She just said quietly, "I don't know what to do anymore." Those words mattered, because they weren't about advice. They were about trust. She needed stability, perspective, someone who wouldn't judge her the way she once judged me. And in that moment, I understood something important. I had already forgiven her, even if she didn't know it yet. I helped her navigate what she was facing, step by step, calmly, without reminding her of the past, without using her vulnerability as leverage. Not because I forgot what she said, but because I had grown beyond needing revenge. And that's when it happened. One night, after everything had settled, she finally said the words I never demanded but once desperately needed to hear. "I was wrong about you." No excuses, no justifications, just honesty. She told me she had measured success too narrowly, that she confused temporary struggle with permanent failure, that she let fear and comparison shape how she saw me, and that the man standing in front of her now was not the one she had judged back then. She apologized, not dramatically, not theatrically, sincerely. I listened, not with anger, not with pride, but with understanding, because when someone truly sees their mistake, punishment becomes unnecessary. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. The words she spoke years ago had shaped me. They had forced me to grow alone. They had taught me. They had shown me the danger of tying your worth to someone else's approval, and I told her that. I told her that being called a failure by the person I loved had nearly broken me, but it also rebuilt me. That it pushed me to discover strength I didn't know I had. That it taught me a lesson I would carry forever. Never let someone else define your value. She listened. This time, she really listened. Our relationship didn't magically return to what it once was. It became something different, something more honest. Respect replaced judgment. Understanding replaced comparison. We learnt that love without empathy is fragile, and ambition without compassion is dangerous. But the biggest change wasn't in her, it was in me. I no longer needed her validation. I no longer feared her disappointment. I no longer measured myself through anyone else's expectations. I had become grounded, not because life became easy, but because I had faced difficulty alone and survived. When I look back now, I don't hate her for what she said. I understand it. People speak harshly when they're afraid of the future, of uncertainty, of falling behind. But understanding doesn't mean accepting the behavior. It means learning from it. And here's the truth, most people never talk about. The people who judge you during your lowest moments rarely imagine a future where they'll need you. But life has a way of rearranging roles. Strength shifts. Circumstances change. And character, real character, always reveals itself over time. She needed me the most when she least expected it. And I was there. Not as a failure, not as a savior, but as a man who had learned his worth. Final lesson perfect for YouTube outro. If someone calls you a failure while you're still trying, remember this: you are not finished yet. And unfinished stories should never be judged by a single chapter.